I want to talk today about the character strengths or virtues that are most important in organizations. When you think about organizational ethics from the point of view of virtues, you start to realize that there are certain character strengths that are not only good characteristics for people to have in general, but that also really contribute to success in the organization and to success of the organization. Now, some of these have to do with a person's life and work satisfaction. So they have to do with happiness in a very direct sense. And happiness, it turns out, satisfaction with work, satisfaction with life, turn out to be highly correlated to success. Basically, successful organizations have happy people in them and have people who are satisfied with their lives and with their work. A place where people are unhappy, either unhappy with the work or unhappy with their lives in general, is not going to be very successful. Those people aren't going to be very successful. The whole group will not be very successful. So satisfaction turns out to be something that from an organizational point of view, we should care about a lot, independently of our own personal interest in living in a way that's satisfying to us and working in a way that's satisfying to us. The second thing is, often people have to work together. How easy is it, or how difficult is it for people to get along with others, to work together in groups? That turns out to be important too. And so it's important for us to think in terms of strengths that have to do with working together, strengths that have to do with dealing with other people. Now, of course, in some jobs, dealing with other people is really secondary. These are less important in those jobs. But in some jobs, personnel, let's say, human resources, sales, a variety of other positions, it's really a question of dealing with people all the time. That's absolutely central. There are other questions of real interest to organizations. For example, are there character strengths or virtues that are highly correlated with health, that are highly correlated with doing well, succeeding on certain concrete measures, for example, among students, that are correlated with getting high grades, or at work, are correlated with meeting metrics and succeeding at doing well by these various metrics? Well, the answer to all of those questions is yes. So I've put some things here on the side to indicate some of the things we're going to care about organizationally. One is satisfaction. It turns out there's not a big difference between satisfaction in life and satisfaction in work. It's often hard for people to be satisfied with their lives if they're not at all satisfied with work. And conversely, it's relatively rare that people are really satisfied at work and also really unhappy in their personal lives. That can happen for a time. It doesn't tend to persist. Well, there's also a question of succeeding here in getting good grades or by various other metrics in whatever one is doing. Question of getting along well with people, and then a question of what correlates with health. I want to return to the categories of shared virtue, those 6 categories we've identified earlier as really crucial and as universal in the sense that every culture at every time seems to value these kinds of virtues: courage, justice, humanity, temperance, wisdom, and transcendence. Each of those is really a category that consists of a variety of more specific virtues, as we'll discuss as we go along. Anyway, let's talk first about satisfaction. Which are the character strengths or virtues that are most closely correlated with satisfaction in life and satisfaction in work? They're not all equally important. In fact, there are 5 that appear to be especially well correlated with satisfaction in both of those senses. The first one is love, in that general category of humanity. Humanity has to do with one's concern for other people, caring for others, being friendly, being generous toward others. All of that is important. If we say, in general, a love for other people, a caring for other people, that turns out to be crucial to satisfaction in life, to satisfaction at work. It's also the one thing that is most closely correlated with getting along well with people. It's also one of the things that turns out to be highly correlated with succeeding by various metrics. If you're a student, getting good grades, for example. If you are in the military, with actually wanting to stay in the military, with re-enlisting. If it's a question of meeting certain metrics at work, it's a question of, well, how well you meet those metrics. It turns out that this attitude of love, concern for others, empathy for others, and so on, that turns out to be crucial. What else is important to satisfaction? Well, under the heading of wisdom, curiosity. Now that's a slightly surprising one. You might have thought wisdom in general, or knowledge, or intelligence. Yes, all of those things matter. But actually curiosity turns out to be the most important one of all. Why? Because curiosity is what keeps you going. It's good to have good judgment on the basis of the information you have. It's good to know a lot so you have a big body of information. But it's the curiosity that lies behind the quest for that information, the quest for that judgment, that turns out to be really critical in being satisfied with your life and being satisfied with your work. It's not a question, in other words, of how far you've gotten. It's the drive to push you further that is actually critical to satisfaction. So curiosity turns out to be the most important thing under that category of wisdom. But then if we're thinking about satisfaction, it turns out that 3 of the 5 character strengths most associated with it, most closely correlated with it, fall under the heading of transcendence. Gratitude, hope, zest. Those turn out to be the most important virtues in connection with satisfaction. Now, at first glance, that's pretty surprising. You might have thought of transcendence as something having to do with religion, and you might say, well, why are they so important? It has to do, remember, this general category of transcendence has to do with finding meaning in things, finding meaning in your life, meaning in your work, meaning in the universe. And that involves a gratitude for the things that are going well, hope that things will go even better in the future, and then zest, a sort of spirit of enthusiasm for living, for working, for doing what you do. That is connected to certain other things. Some people have connected it in some way to courage, for example, but it really seems most critically to be a question of finding meaning in a way that excites you. The person who finds no meaning in what they do generally finds it pretty hard to get excited about it, to approach it with a sense of enthusiasm or zest. But that sense of enthusiasm is connected with finding meaning, and if one of those 5 things I've mentioned is really the most important to success in organizations, it's really zest, enthusiasm, the thing that keeps you going. In fact, you could think of curiosity as zest when applied to wisdom. You could think of love as zest applied to relations to other people. Gratitude and hope intimately connected to that. So zest, enthusiasm, that being spirited in one's approach to things, that really is the most important factor in being satisfied with your work and in satisfied with your life. And that satisfaction with life and work turns out to be the thing that is most closely correlated to success. So those turn out to be the virtues or character strengths that are really most important to success within an organization, and even the success of the organization itself. An organization filled with people who are concerned with one another, who are curious, who are filled with gratitude and hope, and who have an enthusiasm, a zest for what they do, that organization is going to be successful. What else is really important to actually achieving by certain metrics? Getting good grades, re-enlisting in the military, staying with a job, and in general you might say succeeding by various specific metrics. Well, it is to some extent those 5 things we've mentioned, but there's some more specific things. I've already mentioned love, concern for others as crucial. 2 others, perseverance. It's important to persevere. It's not enough, you might say, in studying for that exam to do it with enthusiasm, to be grateful for what you know and hope you know more when you get to the exam. It's a question in part of, look, can you do the work? Can you actually persist? Every job, no matter how interesting the overall job is, every job has certain boring parts to it, parts that are not in themselves that exciting. And so succeeding often involves, well, doing that homework, slogging through the details, persevering through the parts of the job that aren't that wonderful, in which you don't find a huge amount of meaning. If you don't find any meaning, you're in real trouble. But everybody, no matter how enthusiastic, is going to find some elements where it just takes grit, it takes endurance, and it's not just a question of maintaining one's hope and enthusiasm and gratitude. The other thing that's important to achieving metrics, whether it's grades or something else, is prudence. You've got to be smart, self-controlled, willing to delay gratification, willing to work for that goal, yes, persevering toward the goal, and clearing away the other things that might interfere with it. So keeping going, that's the grit, the determination, the perseverance, but clearing away the other things, being able to control oneself when you think, but I'd really rather just watch TV, or go hang out with some friends, or do something else. Prudence is what allows you to exert self-control and keep from doing that, keep in the quest for the goal. Finally, what's most important in terms of health? What character strengths or virtues are most associated with health? The answer is really one: hope, optimism, hope for the future. That's something that is crucially correlated. Now you might say, well, maybe the link goes both ways. I mean, people who are healthy feel more optimism about the future. People who are sick, that it's hard to be optimistic if you don't feel well, or if you really feel like you're in big trouble in health-wise. And yes, there is some feedback going in both directions there. But that spirit of hope, that sense of optimism, overall, having not only meaning in one's life, but a hope that things will get better, turns out to be really important in preserving health. And not just that people who are hopeful and optimistic tend to have better health in general, they also tend to avoid accidents more, for example. That's somewhat surprising. But if you look at accident rates, you'll find that people who are pessimistic get into more accidents. More bad things seem to happen to them even though they're not at fault. Whereas people who are hopeful, optimistic, tend not only to have better health in general, but tend to avoid accidents more. It's an interesting phenomenon. So, if we're thinking about this from the point of view of organizations, what personal virtues should we care most about? In the heading of courage, perseverance, grit, determination, endurance. Under humanity, love, concern for others, empathy for others, wanting the whole group to do well, wishing the best for others. Under temperance, prudence, being willing to be smart about controlling one's own desires, controlling one's own emotion, exercising some good judgment about what to do next. Under wisdom, curiosity, that drive to learn more, to find out more, to develop better ways of understanding it. And then, under the heading of transcendence, most important of all, gratitude, hope, and zest. Having enthusiasm for the task, finding meaning in it, being hopeful about the future and grateful for the past. Those are the things that are actually most important to success. So if you say, blah, 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 ethics, good person, yeah, just tell me what I need to succeed, there's your answer. Above all, approach life with zest, with enthusiasm. Find meaning in what you do. If you find meaning in what you're doing, much of the rest follows. You're going to be curious and want to know more. You will be concerned for others on that quest with you. You will persevere. You will develop prudence and self-control. And so, in a certain sense, this turns out to be the heart of everything, that optimism about the future and zest for living, more important than anything else. Not just to being satisfied and happy, but also to success. One last thought. Organizations can do things to promote these. Not everybody you hire ends up being, well, enthusiastic, hopeful, filled with gratitude, curious, prudent, persevering, concerned for others. But there are ways you can build these traits of characters in employees, for example, or in students, in people in your organization. It's worth thinking about seriously. Don't just think who has the skills needed to do the job. Think who has some of these traits and how can we strengthen those traits in the people in our organization. A more virtuous workforce is going to be a more virtuous and a more successful organization.